The Hidden Life of Trees, Chapter 1, Friendships. And this book is written by Peter Wohlleben. I stand corrected if I pronounce that wrong. This book is, I'm obviously not reading the German version, but it's originally written in German. So this is the English edition. Although, come to think of it, it would be very nice to read it in German as well. Okay. But excuse any mispronunciations of either English or German words. Okay. And you may correct me. I know you know who you are if you're listening. Please do. Okay. Years ago, I stumbled across a patch of strange-looking mossy stones in one of the preserves of old beech trees that grows in the forest I manage. Casting my mind back, I realized I had passed by them many times before without paying them any heed. But that day I stopped and bent down to take a good look. The stones were an unusual shape. They were gently curved, with hollowed-out areas. Carefully I lifted the moss on one of the stones. What I found underneath was tree bark. So these were not stones after all, but old wood. I was surprised at how hard the stone was, because it usually takes only a few years for beechwood lying on damp ground to decompose. But what surprised me most was that I couldn't lift the wood. It was obviously attached to the ground in some way. I took out my pocket knife and carefully scraped away some of the bark until I got down to a greenish layer. Green? This color is only found in chlorophyll, which makes new leaves green. Reserves of chlorophyll are also stored in the trunks of living trees. That could only mean one thing. This piece of wood was still alive. I suddenly noticed that the remaining stones formed a distinct pattern. They were arranged in a circle with a diameter of about 5 feet. What I had stumbled upon were the gnarled remains of an enormous ancient tree stump. All that was left were the vestiges of the outermost edge. The interior had completely rotted into humus long ago, a clear indication that the tree must have been felled at least 400 or 500 years earlier. But how could the remains have clung onto life for so long? Living cells must have food in the form of sugar. They must breathe and they must grow, at least a little. But without leaves, and therefore without photosynthesis, that's impossible. No being on our planet can maintain a centuries-long fast, not even the remains of a tree, and certainly not a stump that has had to survive on its own. It was clear that something else was happening with this stump. It must be getting assistance from neighboring trees, specifically from their roots. Scientists investigating similar situations have discovered that assistance may either be delivered remotely by fungal networks around the root tips, which facilitate nutrient exchange between trees, or the roots themselves may be interconnected. In the case of the stump I had stumbled on, I couldn't find out what was going on, because I didn't want to injure the old stump by digging around it. But one thing was clear. The surrounding beaches were pumping sugar to the stump to keep it alive. The title of this chapter is Friendships, eh? Okay. If you look at roadside embankments, you might be able to see how trees connect with each other through their root systems. On these slopes, rain often washes away the soil, leaving the underground networks exposed. Scientists in the Harz Mountains in Germany have discovered that this really is a case of interdependence, and most individual trees of the same species growing in the same stand are connected to each other through their root systems. It appears that nutrient exchange and helping neighbors in times of need is the rule. And this leads to the conclusion that forests are superorganisms with interconnections, much like ant colonies. Of course, it makes sense to ask whether tree roots are simply wandering around aimlessly underground and connecting up when they happen to bump roots of their own kind. Once connected, they have no choice but to exchange nutrients. They create what looks like a social network, but what they are experiencing is nothing more than a purely accidental give and take. In this scenario, chance encounters replace the more emotionally charged image of active support. Though even chance encounters offer benefits for the forest ecosystem. But nature is more complicated than that. According to Massimo Maffei from the University of Turin, plants, and that includes trees, are perfectly capable of distinguishing their roots from the roots of other species, and even from the roots of related individuals. But why are trees such social beings? Why do they share food with their own species and sometimes even go so far as to nourish their competitors? The reasons are the same as for human communities. There are advantages to working together. A tree is not a forest. On its own, a tree cannot establish a consistent local climate. It is at the mercy of wind and weather. But together, many trees create an ecosystem that moderates extremes of heat and cold, stores a great deal of water, and generates a great deal of humidity. And in this protected environment, trees can live to be very old. To get to this point, the community must remain intact no matter what. If every tree were looking out only for itself, then quite a few of them would never reach old age. Regular fatalities would result in many large gaps in the tree canopy, which would make it easier for storms to get inside the forest and uproot more trees. The heat of summer would reach the forest floor and dry it out. Every tree would suffer. Every tree, therefore, is valuable to the community and worth keeping around for as long as possible, and that is why even sick individuals are supported and nourished until they recover. Next time, perhaps it will be the other way around, and the supporting tree might be the one in need of assistance. That's true. When thick silver grey beeches behave like this, they remind me of a herd of elephants. Like the herd, they too look after their own, and they help their sick and weak back up onto their feet. They are even reluctant to abandon their dead. Every tree is a member of this community, but there are different levels of membership. It makes me think of Paul. I'm glad to be a first tier member. For example, most stumps rot away into humus and disappear within a couple of hundreds of years, which is not very long for a tree. Only a few individuals are kept alive over the centuries, like the mossy stones I've described. What's the difference? Do tree societies have second-class citizens just like human societies? It seems they do, though the idea of class doesn't quite fit. It is rather the degree of connection, or maybe even affection, that decides how helpful a tree's colleagues will be. Mic drop, there. Pen drop, whatever. That's good. Wow, okay. You can check this out for yourself simply by looking up into the forest canopy. The average tree grows its branches out until it encounters the branch tips of a neighboring tree of the same height. It doesn't grow any wider because the air and better light is in the space already taken. However, it heavily reinforces the branches it has extended, so that you get the impression that there's quite a shoving match going on up there. But a pair of true friends is careful right from the outset not to grow overly thick branches in each other's direction. The trees don't want to take anything away from one another, and so they develop sturdy branches only at the outer edges of their crowns, that is to say, only in the direction of non-friends. Such partners are often so tightly connected at the roots that sometimes they may even die together. As a rule, friendships that extend to looking after stumps can only be established in undisturbed forests. It could well be that all trees do this, and not just beeches. I myself have observed oak, fir, spruce, and Douglas fir stumps that were still alive long after the trees had been cut down. Planted forests, which is what most of the coniferous forests in Central Europe are, behave more like street kids, I describe in chapter 27. That's a long way from yet, but okay, we'll get there. Because their roots are irreparably damaged when they are planted. They seem most incapable of networking with one another. As a rule, trees in planted forests like these behave like loners and suffer from their isolation. Most of them never have the opportunity to grow old anyway. Depending on the species, these trees are considered ready to harvest when they are only about 100 years old. I want to continue. But it's really tiring to do all of this, and I can see everything's getting dimmer. And if I continue, it will just get like the video will go dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and you'll hear my voice, and then my voice will go dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And yeah, okay, well, I'll leave you with the heading of chapter 2, which I'm excited for, and that is the language of trees. Okay. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And I hope that was as profound to you as it was to me. And if not, please go get the book or locate the book, sample it, read it. I know I've only read the first bit, but I highly recommend this book. Most definitely, I highly recommend it. I was actually walking and like touching different trees today in the park, the usual park that I always walk in. But yeah, so like, and I can still remember that. And now, like, reading just this small part, it already makes me appreciate it so much more. And it makes a lot of things that I was sort of not thinking but intuiting, that makes sense, like this has brought the language out in a way that I can sort of comprehend it for myself, and also I think for the purposes of being able to talk about it, also reinterpret it from different perspectives, etc. And also to just dig deeper and make other connections to it. Like, what does it mean to me? What does it mean to others? What does it mean in life? Take it literally, expanding upon it, doing what he suggested, actually going to observe these things and seeing for myself. Yeah, I think like the biggest thing about this is I want to just encourage like sharing, and sharing is caring. That sounds like a silly statement, but only wise people have said it, like, sharing is caring. And as far as I know, when that was said, you listened. And it benefited you. Anyway, it's true though. And the way that the lone trees, the trees that are planted with roots already, like, and that reminds me of like a lot of people in society, and I think it's beautiful how this author is reflecting things about life and in current times. I mean, even in previous times. I mean, this is, I have a feeling that this could be, this book has longevity. It's I mean, I haven't fully read it, but it could possibly be that this book is just like the way that it describes, and that it is going to live for a long time, because it's going to continually be relevant and giving, life-giving, and obviously it has a long way to grow, because there's a lot of people on this earth that have yet to discover, understand, interpret, experience, hear, read, even go out into nature and look, and even trip over a root maybe, then you see it. Yeah, so another thing that I want to encourage is not to go and like get copious exercise and go crazy. You know, I'm not saying go for a walk. I'm saying go for a walk, even if it's 5 meters, if the nearest nature place is 5 meters away, good lucky you. And if it's a little bit further away, it's worth the walk, definitely. You can even get in your car and drive in a park, or take a bicycle, or ask a friend to walk with you, whatever it is. But get yourself into nature more. You deserve that. You really deserve that. Everybody does. I'll even admit, even me. There's love there. Ciao.